Okay, good morning everyone. So we are getting started today with the shipping webinar during National Careers Week. So I'm Jess, I work for Maritime UK, and I'm joined today by Susan Bell from the MNTB and Careers at Sea, and Kerrie from the Workboat Association. So Susan is going to kick us off with an overview of the Merchant Navy versus the Royal Navy.
Thank you, Jess. Let me just share my screen, and if you could just let me know that it appears as it should, that would be helpful. All good, excellent. So hi everybody, my name's Susan Bell, and Jess mentioned there I work at the Merchant Navy Training Board and Careers at Sea, and I'm the Training and Careers Manager there. So part of my role is looking after what we would call cadets, and the other half is careers promotion for people going to sea and having jobs on board ships. So one of the questions we get a lot when we attend various careers events is, what is the Merchant Navy? I've heard of the Royal Navy, but I'm not too sure on what the differences are. So I'm hoping that this presentation today can just give you a brief insight into those differences. So the Royal Navy to start with. This is the United Kingdom's naval warfare force, protecting UK's interests by providing security at sea, preventing conflict and providing that humanitarian assistance when needed. It's a global presence, but a fighting force. So if diplomacy fails, the Royal Navy protect our nation's interest and aid its allies. So the types of ships you might see within the Royal Navy are aircraft carriers, they are assault ships, mine hunters, patrol ships, there are various different types as well as some other subsea vessels too. Now, maritime trade is essential to the British way of life. We're an island nation, so 95% of Britain's economic activity depends on our seas and our ports in order to get everything into our islands. So we import goods with a breathtaking £524 billion worth every single year. So it just shows how pivotal the seas play in our everyday life. Now, the Merchant Navy. Again, we use the word Navy here, but it's a different entity altogether. It's a global commercial entity, and that's with ships being managed and operated all around the world. So in short, every ship on the high seas that's not a defence ship or part of a country's military warfare is part of the Merchant Navy. Simply, they carry cargo from A to B, whether that's goods or people. The Merchant Navy is pivotal to global trade, not just for the UK. The term encompasses many different vessel types, from cruise ships, where somebody might be trying to get from the UK over to France, or on their summer holidays on a cruise, to tankers, to bulk carriers, to offshore support vessels. There are many different ships contained within this term, Merchant Navy. And quite differently to the Royal Navy again, there's no central organisation as such or central records. Each seafarer and company is a single entity and an individual company. A bit of the history here then about the Merchant Navy. So the term Merchant Navy originated in Britain, it's believed, but over the years it has been adopted around the world. And it was first introduced by King George V in 1919, and really it was in recognition to the sacrifices that those mercantile seafarers made during the First World War. Although there's been some use of that word prior to that time, it was when it was officially recognised as the Merchant Navy. It's also a time where uniforms started to be introduced. And passenger ships, I believe, were amongst the first to have used uniform in the Merchant Navy to establish between the guest and crew on board. Much like the Royal Navy, you can go by the basic principle of the more stripes on the epaulets, the more and the higher the rank is of the person on board the ship. To cover some of the job roles that you'll find on both the Royal Navy and Merchant Navy, you will find in what we would call the maritime side of the ship, we would start with the navigation or deck officers, and they handle the navigation, communications, cargo, and overall running of the ship. And they also look after the people on board and their crew. Engineering officers operate and maintain all the mechanical equipment throughout a ship, everything from the power generation to fridges, ventilations and lifts. And the electrotechnical officers specialise in looking after the particularly complex electronic and computer systems on various ships too. But not all ships have them. It depends on the level the technology sophistication on board the ships. But there's not just officers on the maritime side of a ship, there are also what we call ratings. And ratings are the support staff on board who work with the guidance of the officers for the technical aspect of the ship. They're skilled seafarers who work in both the deck, engine, and some other departments as well within a ship's crew. But not all ships are technical, and that's a really important reminder. There are many different opportunities at sea. If you think of your local town or city, if you can think of a job there, you can basically think of a job at sea. So if we're talking about a cruise ship, for example, we would have an HR team who would be there for the well-being, health and safety of the crew on board. We have chefs who are very important, who need to keep everybody fed and with the right nutrients and happy to continue with their day-to-day roles. We've got the housekeepers, we've got beauticians, pursers, entertainment, sports coach, hairdressing, photographers. I mean, the list goes on and on. So again, think of those jobs on land, and again, everything needs to happen at sea too. But there's a career beyond being at sea as well that we have to look at, because the long-term prospects of this industry are huge. And if you spend some time at sea and you've gained that vital experience, there's so much to do onshore in the UK, and there's a massive thriving maritime UK industry that depends on those that have that experience to come back ashore and to do roles such as ship superintendency, so looking after maybe a fleet of vessels from an office, coordinating dry docks, port services and management, marine surveyors, marine insurance assessors, lawyers, shipbrokers. Again, the list goes on, and having that experience is a really good entry pathway to this future career. If you are looking at an officer role within the Merchant Navy, it blends hands-on learning on board a ship, on board one of these vessels, and university or college-based study. So it depends on what type of officer you would want to be, whether that's deck, engine or ETO, and that will then determine how much sea time you need. So if you want to go down the deck officer route, you would need 12 months within those 3 years, or if it was an engine or ETO route, you would need 8 months. But at every step along the way with cadets, there's support, and that will lead you away with an educational qualification, and it will also give you a professional seafaring certificate, so that once you have finished your course, which takes 3 years, you would be ready to go on board one of the Merchant Navy vessels to be an officer. It's a fully funded course as well, so it's very attractive if you're not looking to go to university as such and have a different type of career path. Again, 95% of our goods arrive by sea, so the need for people to rely on our seafarers is very high, and it's a really great opportunity and something to really provide to the economy, and it's pivotal to our everyday lives. Our Careers at Sea website is a central source of industry information on the Merchant Navy and the training pathways and the career progressions that's available. If you have any feedback on this or have any questions once you've reviewed it, please feel free to get in contact with us. Of course, for the Royal Navy side, Royal Navy handle all of their recruitment and everything to do with their recruitment process directly. So I would advise you to look at their website if you're interested in that route. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Susan. That was a really great overview. So now we'll be talking to Kerrie from the Workboat Association.
Thank you very much, Jess, and good morning, everybody. My name is Kerrie Forster, and I'm the Chief Executive of the Workboat Association. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is what is a workboat. So much like we were just hearing from Susan just now, we're an arm of the Merchant Navy. Vessels like you can see in the background of me here, the smaller vessels, as you saw at the beginning of Susan's presentation, that were towing the aircraft carrier in and out of port. They do services from towage and harbour towage such as that to shore or ship to shore movements. So tenders taking people from the cruise ships to the shore, for example, or supporting with bunker operations, so putting fuel on board the vessels or water on board the vessels, taking food to vessels, taking people, not only from vessels, but for example, structures at sea, like lighthouses or offshore wind turbines or oil and gas installations. We do above water activities and below water activities. So we could be above water and doing some work like installing some new paintwork on a structure at sea. So they're using the vessel as like a foundation for a set of painters to sit there, or welders. It could be inspecting structures at sea. It could be towing something from one country to another country, and it could be right across the world. So in my experience, we've run tows the whole way around the world. So even though it's a small vessel, for example, it could be going a long way. And below the water, we do things like facilitating diving operations, survey operations. So we're scanning seabeds and seeing how the bottom of the seabed is changing. That could be for commercial reasons. So it could be because maybe there needs to be a new pipeline installation being put there, or a cable. Or it could be for environmental issues. So it could be surveying to see, for example, depletion of coral, or the new developed reefs that are being supported or maintained. Workboats are essentially a small commercial vessel which is under 500 tons. These vessels are often crewed by a small number of people. So in the case where Susan was saying that there's need for nearly every job that we've got on shore to also happen on a boat, that's really true. But the thing is, on board a workboat, all those jobs are probably done by a small team of 2 to 5 or 6 people. So you have to be the cleaner, the photographer. There's not much hairdressing that happens on board a workboat, but the officers on board, for example, you're generally working with 1 or 2 officers, maybe a navigation officer, so the master of the vessel, and an engineer in some cases, and then a rating on board as well that will be doing a lot of the deck work. Now, although we heard that cadetships are one of the main ways to get into larger shipping merchant navy, for everything under 500 gross ton, we've really supported as an industry the apprenticeship series. So within the UK, we've got maritime apprenticeships in both England and in Scotland. So within England, we have apprenticeships now which are covering all duties on board a vessel under 500 gross tons, from being a rating, so starting on deck, all the way through to becoming a master of a 500 gross ton vessel, and everything in between. So engineering, officer of the watch, master of inland waterways as well. So the apprenticeships are there and available. They're government funded, and they're also structured in the same way, so that you know that if you're going to be training somebody, they're going to get the same level of training as the previous people that you've also hired. And that's really fundamental. It means that within your business, you can plan ahead for succession, you can plan ahead for stability and quality. And the relationship that operators or vessel operators have with their training centres is a very healthy one. Whether you're doing a cadetship or apprenticeship, we really see that this bond is something that's getting stronger and stronger. As an industry, we're developing more. I've got a small video which I'm going to play, which is going to cover a lot of some of the details you might be missing, like how much can you get paid as an entry master, for example, on a workboat, or what kind of jobs, what does it look like? So I'm going to play the video now, and I hope that everyone will be able to see it. So that's really everything from me. If you've got any questions, as you see on the website at the end of that video, go along to the Maritime UK careers page, and there's lots of information there about the different sectors, or contact us directly at the Workboat Association. We'd be pleased to help.
Awesome, thanks, Kerrie. Whilst anyone's thinking of any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your hand to ask Kerrie or Susan any questions. I've got a question for you, Kerrie. So I think with careers at sea, at deep sea, we can see working patterns of maybe 3 months on, 3 months off, or 1 month on, 1 month off. How does it work with workboats?
Okay, that's a really good question, and it's actually one of the reasons that I was attracted to the industry rather than going onto larger ships. So I had no interest in going offshore for months at a time. To me, I wanted to be closer to home. So generally, we find that people would do smaller shift patterns, either 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off, or 2 weeks on and 1 week off, maybe a month on and 2 weeks off, but it's normally smaller staggered shift patterns. And quite often, depending where you're working, you could either be living on board the vessel at sea, or you could be in port every night, or you could be living onshore every night, or you could even be living at home, because maybe you're driving the pilot boat in your local port. So you're literally at home with your family every night.
Amazing, thanks, Kerrie. I guess my other main question, I think you've answered it already. I've forgotten now. No, it's completely gone, Kerrie. You've done such a good job at explaining workboats to us that I've completely forgotten. But I've remembered. Where do you see the future of the workboat industry? I think what we're seeing coming up in the next 5 to 10 years is lots of work around the coast of the UK. So floating offshore wind, tidal stream energy, offshore wind turbines. What do you see happening in the next 5 to 10 years?
Okay, well, definitely one of the big things in the UK is meeting the energy demands of the country. So a lot of renewable energy is being moved offshore, so offshore wind farms, tidal, as you've explained. With that requires a huge amount of vessel activity. So predictions for the North Sea alone are predicting that the vessels capacity or involvement in those projects is going to continue to grow, and it's going to continue to grow significantly before 2050. So there's going to be more and more vessels working on those projects, although the vessels themselves are getting more sophisticated. So what used to be quite a simple vessel, we're now seeing quite highly sophisticated vessels, and this is so that we can do more whilst we're at sea. We removed the need of having 2 vessels because we can replace it with 1, which is important because we would never be able to meet the demand if we didn't diversify, but also to try and meet the global decarbonisation requirements. So vessels are now going net zero and lower carbon footprints. I mean, they've got larger battery packs on board. There's a lot of electronics. Maybe they're using hydrogen or future propulsion technology. And we're getting rid of the diesel engines, etc. So it's only going to get more advanced.
Amazing. Thank you so much, both. I can't see any questions in the chat or any hands raised, but thank you for your time. And I think that was a really great overview of shipping. So I hope you all have a good day, and we'll finish there.